Thinking of investing, working, or starting a business in the cannabis industry? We've got you covered right here on Plant Problems. Hosted by Tony Frischknecht, Plant Problems takes a different approach to cannabis than what you're seeing and hearing from the mainstream media. Come along with Tony and be in the know about how to invest, work, or start a cannabis business. Let's get the show started with your host, Tony Frischknecht.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Plant Problems. My name is Tony Frischknecht, and I am your host. Well, today I've got a special guest on. I'm bringing him on because us as business owners, we look for every opportunity of help we can get, and most of it comes down to finances and financially. And the reason why I'm bringing this gentleman on is because he's got some different ways to help create some efficiencies for you and your business, and really look to save you a lot of money, a lot of headaches, and a lot of time. So before I bring him on, a little bit about him. He was an economist for a utility company, holds an MBA from Bainbridge Graduate Institute, has a BA from Colorado College. He also is a certified energy manager through the Association of Certified Engineers. Please welcome Bob Gunn from Seinergy. How are you doing, Bob?
Hi, Tony. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on the show today.
Hey, yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for being on the show. So, Bob, what I like to talk to all my new guests about before we get too far into it is why did you decide this industry is the direction you wanted to head?
Well, cannabis kind of landed in my lap and on my career path when legalized cannabis entered Washington State, which is where I live. I've been in the electric utility sector since 2008. And in that capacity, we do conservation planning. We identify opportunities to save energy. And the greatest opportunities to save energy are, not surprisingly, where we use the most energy. So this is a brand new energy load. And I could read the headlines. And I was self-employed at the time, about 2.5 years into my my own consulting gig, post-utility employment. And I just thought, well, heck, if it's really using that many watts per square foot, why aren't these growers connecting with the utility? I showed up. I joined my local marijuana business association in downtown Seattle, started networking, just kind of fly on the wall, got to understand really and validate with my own two eyes, getting invitations in the door to see, oh, wow, it really uses 68 watts per square foot and operates 4,380 hours per year, et cetera. And quickly, I asked the growers, well, why aren't you talking to the utility? If you're interested in, back then, ceramic metal halides was kind of considered efficient. And LEDs, in 2014, 15, LEDs don't even resemble the quality we have today. Mm-hmm. But still, they were interested. And I said, well, let's talk to utility. I bet we could get $200,000 from them out of the deal, and I was met with deer in the headlights response.
Yeah, I bet you did. They were like, yeah, this is too good to be true. Get out of here.
Yeah, too good to be true. And I said, no, let's do it. And I finally just said, hey, if you don't believe me, that's fine. I'll work on spec and we'll share in the upside a little bit. I'll just go out and get these grants. So I did one, I did two. Now we've done about a little over 220, I think, projects. And really, we're just essentially writing a custom grant from a grower, the utilities customer, to say, hey, I want to install this thing that that uses less energy. It has more savings relative to what I might otherwise use, or what I'm used to growing with HPS, but I'm willing to try LED if you can help me offset some of that cost. And utilities kick the tires about how we're measuring the savings, what we need as far as validating it. Anyways, I'm getting a little down the rabbit hole. But.
That's okay. No, with all that said, why are utility companies incentivized by working with the growers?
Yeah. Okay. Good question. Utilities invest in energy efficiency or conservation, use them synonymously, because it's the lowest cost resource. And it's really dollars and cents. And this is what I got to learn while I was working at the utility as an economist, that they look over the long term. They say our loads are growing 3% per year. We need to either build more power plants or do something to bring the curve down. And energy efficiency is way more cost effective. It costs about long term, it might cost the utility $100 a megawatt hour to invest in conservation to have their customers use less energy versus $200 or $300 a megawatt hour to go buy gas savings, or build a power plant and operate it for 30 years. So it's truly a win-win, and nobody loses. All the ratepayers win because the utility is less exposed to market fluctuations and prices, peak events and things like that. The participant, the person who applies for the grant and invests in the premium efficiency, this applies equally for a cannabis grower doing LEDs, or you or I, getting a heat pump in our house. The utility might give us $800. We win, and then the person next door who didn't participate wins. So anyways, there's all sorts of societal benefit cost tests, total cost ratio tests. Utilities really run it through the ringer so that the regulators or the board who oversees the utility understands why we're investing $100 or $100 million into these demand side savings.
So the growers that are out there that, of course, aren't a Bob Gunn or are in a very, very new market, what kind of advice would you give them if they're looking into, trying to create some efficiencies with their lighting and their heating and cooling?
Well, I would say look at the highest cost thing, and when you experience that sticker shock, let's take a step back and put it in the context of the operating costs. I mean, energy efficiency does sell itself, but there's this first cost that's a huge barrier, especially when we really lack the traditional financing opportunities. So an LED might cost $1,000 versus an HPS at $200 or $300. Mm-hmm. But even without incentives, it'll probably pay for itself in 4 or 5 years, depending on your rates. Pay for itself quicker in California with 20-cent rates, but maybe not so quickly in Washington. But with incentives, it generally cuts that payback period in half or so. So I would say, let's see what's possible with your local utility. It's kind of hit or miss. Some utilities offer awesome incentives, some offer nothing. So I would say, plan early, reach out to us. This is what we've been doing. We have been tracking, we've done well over 2,000 estimates. So someone just saying, here's my zip code. I'm looking at LEDs. What can you tell me? And we can quickly triage your job. We'll say, oh, well, you're on a residential meter. Maybe you're a caregiver. You're on a residential meter. Sorry, that won't be eligible for these incentives. Mm-hmm. Or, oh, you already bought the lights. No, you need pre-approval. So, reach out to me. It doesn't have to be me. Most solid lighting vendors should know the lay of land pretty well. And same thing for some of the HVAC or dehumidification suppliers as well. We provide those services to some of the suppliers because we're specialized in that. But yeah.
Are you saying that a good lighting supplier should have this information and be able to provide it to you if they know anything about what they're doing?
Yes.
Is it safe to say that if they know nothing about this, you should probably run the other direction?
Yes. Well, I mean, it's no one's fault for not understanding utilities, but at this point, these are commercial sales. If we're talking about selling some $100,000 worth of some LEDs, and they don't want to take the time to figure out, what opportunities are available for the customer to help pay for this. Yeah, mm-hmm. I would pass that judgment on the lighting vendor that in their customer success.
Well, it's good to know because there's a lot of business owners here that simply don't have the time to do all the research. So I think just knowing that little tip right there, tip you off. You're like, yeah, I probably still need to keep searching and find the right guys. So I appreciate you sharing that. So when you go into a company, when you're looking at efficiencies, I mean, there's a lot to look at, especially in the grow. I remember going back and trying to create some kind of a data collection for our company personally. Like, let's see what kind of draw we're pulling off of the current lighting system. How can we, reduce this? That's relatively, that the savings will be worth it to us, but doesn't break the bank. Is there a way to tier this into your system that, if you've got, maybe you have 100,000 or 200,000 to reinvest into your company, because really that's pushing the limits for a lot of companies because we don't have access to the traditional financing. I mean, are there steps and ways to perform this along with the grants that we're talking about? Is there something that you can recommend, or is there a systematic way to do this?
It's a good question. I'll mention something that I used to do, but it might not be too useful because I don't do it anymore. Is I took a card from what the energy services or ESCO market, energy services company, where, when you invest in energy efficiency, it creates cash flows. Let's say you retrofit from an HPS existing system to an LED, it might lower your power bill by $5,000 a month. In theory, if you could finance those lights for $5,000 or less, you're cash flow positive, and the savings are literally paying for that. So that's something that people do all the time for, college campuses or, some major upgrades, things like that. We did do some private financing for a while, but we stopped doing it because of the risk and the difficulty for us to scale up a model. But we were doing that. We would say, okay, you want $100,000 in lights. We'll lease it to you for $3,000 a month, and your savings are $3,500 a month. So it kind of pays for itself. I wish I could recommend a strong financial company out there. That's still a difficult market to tap. I think it's, you'll find some one-offs. Some lighting vendors will offer things like that, or they might offer to collect the rebate on your behalf. So let's say of that $100,000 investment, maybe $40,000 is going to come back from a rebate. They might say, okay, well, we'll give you 90 days and we'll collect that from the utility.
Okay. So if somebody goes and talks to your company and says, I want to do this, how do I pay Bob? Like, where does Bob make his money? That's what a lot of people are going to ask, right? They're going to be like, well, is he charging me a fee for this, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a totally fair question. We align we get paid out of the rebate process.
Oh, okay.
Success fee. So that, I won't discuss specific rates here.
No, I got it.
We'll say we'll work on spec. If we get nothing, okay, maybe we spent 5 hours on this and didn't get anywhere with it, but we also might work for 6 months, and then there's a pay date. We get a little percentage, and the customer gets the rest. That's where we get paid. Part of what we do that I think is unique is we align our incentive with the payday, like the actual check back from the utility, which first of all takes longer than you'd ever expect. The utilities do their best, but sometimes you go through all this stuff for 6 months and they say, great, we'll cut the check now, and you wait 90 more days. And in an industry where cash is king, that can really hurt. We have no net terms, right? There's nothing that there's some companies now are doing 30 days, but not 90 days. That's unheard of. Yeah, but and you're kind of, you can't really negotiate with the utility.
Yeah, because they hold the keys, right?
They do. So yeah, but I'm not thinking of anyone specific, but some lighting vendors might say, oh yeah, you're going to get an 80% rebate. Just here, sign this PO and go talk to the utility. And, they wish you well, but really they make the transaction and move on. We say, no, we're going to sit with you like a real estate agent, and we'll come, to the end, to the finish line, or until we make the touchdown. And then when we actually get the check from utility, we'll settle up there.
So if somebody reached out to you, Bob, what do they have to lose to go through the process?
Nothing. A couple hours. Maybe a couple hours of their time.
Okay.
But also, even if someone's, I don't know if I'm going to say strongly interested or mildly interested, but if you're considering an LED, but that first cost is a barrier, that's really when the utilities want to talk to you. Honestly, they want to know. And in some places, more regulated places like in California, they really need to show to their regulators that their incentive dollars are influencing the grower to do something that they wouldn't otherwise do. So it's actually beneficial the earlier you talk to them.
Really? Okay. Yeah. So they can prove their worth to the legislators. Like, look, we are doing whatever we can to work with this industry. Yeah. There's actually,
I understand. I used to do evaluation of these things too. And at the end of a program year, they'd say, okay, we gave away $1 million. Now, how much of the people, let's say that was $1 million to 1,000 different customers, they'd ask the question aloud, how many of these people were going to do this anyways, and they just took the $1,000? We want to give it to the people who are on the fence. And the people who are going to do it anyways, we want to kind of exclude them. They call those free riders, and they try to weed out the free riders. And some of them will even have very structured, 14 different questions asking, what would you do otherwise, or absent our incentives, what would you do? And sometimes those are trick questions, in my opinion. So if you say, I was going to buy the LEDs anyway, I'm committed to energy efficiency, I'm going to do this. They'd say, well, thanks for calling. If you're going to do it anyways, we don't need to give you the $1,000.
Now, is it, and tell me if I'm wrong, is it when somebody goes and they figure out, okay, we're going to go through the grant process, we get a grant, do they have to spend the money up front to when they purchase the lights and then wait for the rebate to come back?
Yes.
I mean, that's essentially what a rebate is, but I just want to clarify, like, if you've got to spend $1 million.
Yeah. Yes. No, these are important questions you're asking. Pre-approval is paramount almost everywhere. And
there's pre-approval. That's what they call it, huh?
There's pre-approval.
Okay.
So before you buy anything and before you sign that PO, when you're kind of considering the LEDs, that's when, it would work with us. We would apply. It takes about 4 weeks for the utility to review the application, review what you're going to do, what you might have otherwise done, what the energy savings are, and what the cost differences are. They'll come back and say, great, you're approved for X dollars.
Okay.
Let's just say you're approved for $20,000 out of this $100,000 order. Then you buy the lights. So yes, you have to go buy the lights for $100,000, and then you install them, and then the utility will do the post inspection and review the invoices.
Let's walk through the post inspection, because I think that those details are extremely important, because so any of you out there, I got excited for you. This is the part where, hey, this is how we check mark the boxes. So,
yeah.
So anyway, go ahead, Bob.
So the post inspection is critical. Here's a couple of landmines that I don't want anyone to step in, my customers or otherwise, is, if let's say you get approved on June 1, you have the approval letter that says you may install these lights, but then afterwards you tell utility, okay, they're all hung up. Come check it out. Come see the lights. And they say, great, show me a final invoice. And if that invoice said, May 15th, the utility said, wait a second, you bought these before we approved these. That right there is a big landmine. So that's why so that's number one. Make sure the approval dates.
Because that goes into the free riders that you were talking to me about before, right?
Yeah.
So that's an instant red flag right there.
Yep. And it'll say, in very explicit terms, or it's more different. Utilities treat it a little differently, but almost always they say, pre-approval is required before purchase. So before signing that PO, certainly before check. I would say they don't do forensic accounting. They don't ask for check stubs.
Yeah.
You will look at the invoice date. Okay. So that's
keep number one in mind, guys, because that's a big one that could cost you hundreds of thousands. Anyway, what's number two?
They're going to come inspect it and make sure you do what you said you were going to do. If things change, if you said I was going to put 100 flower lights in, but because of some HVAC equipment, you had 98 lights, no big deal, but your incentive will go down by, proportionately.
Yeah.
Or
are they checking, do they get down to checking, not VIN numbers, but model numbers and stuff like that? Do they get into it?
They will check model numbers. Yeah. If you said you're going to buy this 780 watt light, but then you switched brands, well, minor change orders can be negotiated. That's no big deal. But if you switch to if you said, I didn't do 100 of the 780 watt lights, I went with 500 of these 32 watt lights or something, they might say, well, wait, you really need to run that past us first. We can usually salvage that. I do a lot of damage control because these are minor change orders, and the facility manager and the head grower aren't thinking about this. So we can negotiate most of that. But you just have to make, ideally, we would let the utility know ahead of time, hey, I've had projects take so long, they get approved. You know how funding works in construction.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a year later, they're actually installing, and now a new generation of light has come out. And they say, well, I'm going to go with this new one is more efficient.
It's got better ratings. For some reason, it's just better than the old one, right?
Utility might try to kick us back to the application process and say, no, keep the approval. Let's just do a change order. So anyway, so they will check the invoices and the installation dates, and they'll come see what you actually installed, and they'll calibrate the final incentive to that amount. Incentives generally can go down from what they've approved you at. They rarely go up.
Gotcha.
So if it's ever a situation like I was saying, there's this newer model available and we're doing 50% more canopy because we we leased the facility next door. Well, that's fine. But let's tell them about that as soon as possible so we can get 50% more incentive.
Are you working throughout the U.S.? Are you working in every state?
Yeah, we work in every state up in Canada as well. We get inquiries in other places like Puerto Rico, even though they don't really have incentives and a pretty funny electrical grid. But yeah, we work anywhere where this kind of utility mechanism exists.
Do you anticipate any type of federal government grants in the future as we evolve?
No, I don't. Grants from the federal government are not common. What is common and we're familiar with from the federal government is tax credits for things like electric vehicles or solar, which have done amazing things for increasing adoption, creating economies of scale and look at the cost of solar from 10 years ago to now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Arguable, you don't need an incentive anymore. That's the entire purpose of incentives. In that case, a tax credit incentive. There are some investment tax credits in general for energy efficiency. If you invest, say you have a commercial building and you're not a cannabis grower and you invest in a more efficient heat pump, there are just standard, what's it called? 179D. This is not tax advice, but I think it's called 179D, where you can get a 30% tax credit on energy efficiency investments. Of course, that is the IRS. So long as cannabis is federally legal, you will not get IRS tax credits on anything. And it's debatable on if that's part of the facility upgrade or not, or if this is considered more of an appliance, like grow lights. Are they an appliance or part of the facility? I don't want to go too far down that because I don't know the answers and I can't give tax advice. But from the federal government, I think what we might see that would help there is if they came out with any federal standards, because each state is making up their own rules. You may have heard Massachusetts has a 36 watts per square foot, or you use this type of LED that has this type of efficacy. Illinois did something similar. And it's difficult, especially for an MSO or.
Well, I'm glad you brought up regulations because really are you pretty familiar with the regulations and the localities in a lot of places that you work?
Yes. With regard to energy code, yes.
Okay. What are we seeing coming down the pipes right now in states such as California?
A total hodgepodge of well-intended policymakers, but that don't really understand the market. I've seen, so California, for example, there's Title 24, it's the Building Energy Code. Some of the earlier draft stuff for dehumidification said you have to use only desiccant dehumidifiers. And the HVAC people in the room said, well, that's not appropriate. Use that for cold storage or different applications. Someone remembered from the energy efficiency days, desiccant, equals efficiency. Yeah, for something else. It doesn't transfer. You need to talk to the manufacturers and the horticulture who are building out these facilities to say, what's the best in class? What are the costs or the barriers, and where's a reasonable place to set a minimum threshold?
Why do we see that disconnect so often?
Man, they say it's stakeholder engagement, and I've been pretty outspoken with California specific. And I'll get in the room and say, look, I'm not a stakeholder here. We are the energy efficiency community trying to reduce energy waste on this other industry, but you need to get that other industry in the room, the people who are operating the facilities and making purchase decisions. And let's make sure that we don't, forcing everyone to go LED is an example that is too much to stomach overnight. Offering incentives for early adopters, I think is great, but a lot of growers I've spoken with, especially in California, where the fluidity between the illicit and the regulated market, it's more fluid than other places. They say, if I'm forced to do this, there's already so many layers of regulation, taxation, I just won't participate in that market. I'll go back to the old ways. And that's
do you see that? Is it pretty common?
Yeah. That response is very common. So we got involved in there with that. I started working with some cannabis trade associations that said, hey, what do you really think about this proposed LED only mandate? And they said, no, that would bankrupt me. I can't play. We can't just retrofit or just move to a greenhouse. We're set up in this 50,000 square foot indoor place. So anyways, that was a lot of well-intended, but really uninformed policy coming out, state by state, jurisdiction by jurisdiction. And to make it worse, oftentimes the groups tasked with energy regulation for cannabis are maybe the Department of Agriculture or the Department of Public Health. They don't have experience with cannabis or with energy regulation. Again, to your federal question, if Energy Star or the Department of Energy would weigh in on this and set a national standard, that would help having 50 different standards or worse.
Yeah, they would eliminate a lot of the confusion. And this all starts because we're starting from the bottom and working up in legalization, right? I mean, you can go to Canada and they have it just the opposite. They have all the problems going down, right?
Yeah.
And we're kind of playing in different countries and different levels. And it's there's no silver bullet really for this. I mean, aside from going to recertification or rescheduling of the drug itself, that would save a lot, that in so many ways. But, the regulation side is so big on it. In California, I'm in the middle of the country. I'm in Colorado. California, East Coast, West Coast have always been the extremists, right? And then it kind of pushes to the center of the country and we get a little bit watered down version of it. How do you suggest some of these people, some of the growers that are having frustrations, how do you think they could solve a lot of these problems with this separation or this breakdown of communication in between local and the industry?
Man, well, I mean, I wish I could give advice. I mean, I don't have a lot of political background, but showing up, utilities, and I assume policymakers as well, they seem to not connect with the growers very well. I feel like I've had success because I kind of took off my utility hat. I paid my dues. I went and started going to cannabis shows and meeting people and just having an open mind. Whereas a lot of utility folks, some of them are making big decisions on how facilities should run, and maybe they've been in one or two grows, and I don't think that cuts it. And I've heard them say, even large utilities say, well, we can't get in the door. I'll knock on the door, but they don't want me to come in. So that's just maybe a cultural barrier that still needs to be open. I would say, if you're a cannabis grower, call your utility, say, hey, I'm here. I'd love, to work with you about energy management,
Is there anything for them to be worried about if they reach out to the electric companies?
No. I mean, I'm assuming you're doing everything above board. You have nothing to hide. No, not at all. I mean, if anything, the utilities will want, from a customer service standpoint, will want to put you on the best rate. I know in, say, Southern California, you can get on ag rates and save a lot on your.
Really? I hadn't heard about this. So really, okay. Their price per watt goes way down.
Yeah, exactly. The price per watt goes way down because you're classified as agriculture. And, but very few people actually follow through on that.
I mean, it doesn't seem like that's the hard. It doesn't seem like that's a hard conversation to have.
No, increasingly actually. So the grid's changing as well. The carbon profile of the grid's changing, especially in California, with so many, say, renewables during midday. It's almost free from the utility side to use energy between, say 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. The power is almost free, if not negative price. You get so much renewables, nowhere to put the power. Whereas in the evening, it really spikes, and that's when all, say, the coal and the gas power plants come on to meet the evening demand.
Okay.
So that's when it goes up not by not twice as expensive for the utility, maybe 100 times more expensive. So if you could save energy there, or maybe shift your flower rooms to go from midnight to noon instead of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., that could be worth a lot to the utilities. They would be willing to pay you, but you got to start that conversation somewhere.
So will they go through that process with you? Like, we can change our times however we want. Mr. Power Company, will you help me figure that out? They'll be like, yeah, no problem. Is that really you think their attitude with it?
Yeah. I mean, the word comes up is price signal. That's kind of a demand response program or a load shifting. Mm-hmm. But I would say the growers could come to the table and say, look, we have this, say, megawatt of lighting load on our grid, right? We need it 12 hours a day. There's some limitations, right? You don't want your labor force to be working in the dark or with green headlamps. Mm-hmm. But if they said the utility, well, hey, if it's worth $400 per megawatt hour or whatever, if it's worth X dollars per year for me to work in these hours instead of that hours, I'm willing to do that. But they might not have a fully baked program, or they might chicken and an egg, right? They don't want to develop a program if there's no one on the other side to participate. But once they see, hey, here's a megawatt of load, that's like a power plant to them. And they would want to shift your load to other places where their power is less expensive for them or lower carbon.
Well, and it seems like to me, if you were to, let's say, get your association group together, mm-hmm. say, hey, we've got 20 of the largest growers right here, mm-hmm. Mr. Utility Company, mm-hmm. we need some savings. We want to work with you. Mm-hmm. I would assume that's enough incentive for them to jump off the fence and say, absolutely, let's build a program.
Yes, they will do that. And there's definitely strength in numbers. And I think, growers might compete with each other in the market or at retail, but I think there's an opportunity for some sort of collective bargaining when it comes to the utilities.
And I think that's, whether you call it the black market or the legacy market, I think that is something that, speaking to you guys out there that are listening to this right now, Bob brings up a really good point. This is, you guys are going to be, there's competition out there, absolutely. But when it comes to power and numbers and actually negotiating this stuff, this is where you can win all as an industry. So for you, those of you guys out there that are still real secretive about how they do things, and it really has nothing to do with how you're doing your grow, it's saving you money. And in my business, I like to save as much as possible to keep some for me at the end of the day. And in cannabis with taxes, that's everything. Mm-hmm. Especially your overhead, right? So taking that next step, and Bob, if somebody's just been on the fence about this, do you have a website that they can reach out to you on and contact you and really get some deep information? Because I don't know that there's too many people out there that are working for grants like you. You're the first one that I've heard of at this point. So I could be wrong, but so how do people reach out to you?
Well, my website is Seinergy.com, Seinergy.com. Okay. I'm on LinkedIn as well. I don't have much other social following. But yeah, Seinergy.com, there's an intake form, a question form.
Well, and if you guys are you guys are subscribers of mine, and you can visit plantproblem.com. All of Bob's info is going to be on there. But I brought you on because I think there's some huge value in this, especially for the little guy. You little guys out there that are struggling right now, and like I've always done, well, I just pay my power bill. That's just kind of how it happens, right? You just over and over again. But if you're looking at, we had $20,000 to $30,000 a month electrical bills. It is massive on these indoor grows. And I know you guys out there listening are either going to be experienced or are in the midst of it right now. I think it's worth a shot at digging into this and really seeing what they can perform. So Bob, I want to thank you for sharing some of this info with us. And I love what you're doing out there and creating, when it comes down to it, it's like, well, if I can work with somebody and they get paid when I get paid, that's the best deal I can think of. So thanks for doing that. And, I look forward to, seeing this program grow, because I think there's going to be some really innovative ways that guys can use this. So guys, thanks, Bob, thanks so much for being on the show today. And guys, if you have any questions, please go to plantproblem.com, specifically on electrical. If you want to talk electrical efficiencies, please tag me on my social or reach out to me through my website, and I'll connect you with Bob. I met Bob through LinkedIn, through some other sources. So we can connect you there and get you guys going to at least explore. So please reach out to me and do that, Bob. And thank you so much for being on the show, and I look forward to seeing what happens in the future.
All right. Thanks so much, Tony. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure.
You've just listened to another insightful episode of Plant Problems. If you like what you heard so far, don't forget to tell your friends and colleagues. For additional resources or to leave a review, head over to plantproblem.com. Join us again next week on Plant Problems with Tony Frischknecht. We look forward to having conversations with you as we go along this journey.